Pickle, let's go to the hotline, and let's bring in the play-by-play voice of the Texas Longhorns and the voice of Texas high school football, the co-host of High School Scoreboard Live on Fox Sports Southwest. We are joined by the great Craig Way. And Craig, we were having this conversation today instead of yesterday because you were on the phone with Texas Tech coach Matt Wells. What could Texas Tech coach Matt Wells possibly have said that was more important than joining us to talk about nonsense?
Did I say it was more important? I merely pointed out that was my one opportunity to have a conversation.
That's true.
That's sort of. And by the way, I heard Pickle talking about mouth coverings. Did that automatically make you think of me when you're talking about mouth coverings? Is that how that works?
I have seen you in a mask. So that is,
yeah.
I suppose that's maybe where it comes from. But I want to. For this week's visit, I want to kind of go class by class, and I think I have one big question for each classification for you. But we're going to start with the biggest classifications, with 6A and 5A. 6A and 5A, okay, of course, start this week. Games are going to be played for 6A and 5A. And I know that on your show on the Horn, you talk with a lot of the big-time coaches around the Austin area about getting going. A lot of them are 6A and 5A coaches. In talking with them this week and in the leading up, what have you heard from them about the challenges of starting late or things like that? Or is it just a matter of itching to get on the ball field?
It depends on who you visit with. And Tep, I remember having this conversation, not this particular conversation, but another type of conversation. It made me think of it depends on which coach you visit with. I remember when we were talking about realignment back a couple of years ago, and Hank Carter at Lake Travis was of the mindset of, I would just as soon play all district games. Start with week one. I don't care. Let's play 10 district games. Let's go. And then you visit with Todd Dodge at Westlake, and he's like, I kind of like having a non-district game or two, that sort of thing. So in yesterday, visiting with Hank Carter, I asked him a very similar question about that. He was kind of pleased, really almost, or relieved a bit, that they are not playing this week, and that had to do with cancellations and things like that. Because remember, originally, the non-district schedule for Lake Travis, they were going to open with Arlington Martin again. And, of course, we know where Martin's going to be on Friday. They'll be in AT&T Stadium. And so, of course, that got shoved aside in the original reworking of schedules and then a follow-up reworking of schedules. And so they don't play until next Thursday when they take on Westwood High, the Round Rock School District. And he said he thinks that's a good thing for his guys. They've had some guys banged up, and most notably his quarterback, Nate Yarnell. And by the way, you'll get a kick out of this, Steph. He said, I think we're going to just completely cancel the second practice of fall practice because each of the last 2 years he's lost his starting quarterback to injury on the second practice of fall practice. So he said, I think we're just going to skip that going forward, next year. But they do expect to have Nate Yarnell back in a few weeks. So he probably won't miss more than a game or two based on the injury and the recovery and on the fact that Lake Travis doesn't even play its first game until next week. So he said they scrimmaged the other night. He said, we weren't ready to play a game, and we probably aren't ready to play a game this week. And they have a scrimmage against Cedar Ridge this week. Then you contrast that to Todd Dodge, who we had on the program this morning, and they are just chomping at the bit to get on the field and play a game. And they had the by now well-chronicled journey of 3 different opponents. It was supposed to be South Lake Carroll at the Texas football days. That didn't happen, obviously. Got wiped out on the first thing. Then there was this real journey, a real nomadic journey that they had with Highland Park. They were going to play at Highlander. Then they were talking briefly about playing at AT&T Stadium. They were talking about playing at SMU. And then that didn't happen. And then it was going to be Globe Life Park in Arlington. And he said on the air this morning, Randy Allen went out to Globe Life Park, walked around, called Todd back and said, Todd, I don't think I really want to play this game here. I went out there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no breeze at all there at Globe Life Park, and I think our teams will just melt. And he said, I don't know if Coach Allen expected me to argue. He goes, I'm in a position not to argue with anybody this year. We want to play. So then it was going to be back at Highlander, and then, of course, Highland Park had its bout with COVID cases. So that game gets wiped off the books. And he said, 5 minutes after finding out he didn't have Highland Park on the schedule anymore, he had an opponent. 5 minutes after, picked up the phone, called Church Clemens. They're coming in the Shap Stadium on Friday night, and he said they're just happy they have a game. He said nothing's promised. He said we want to give our kids as many games as possible. And so that's, two kind of different viewpoints of it from the two premier 6A programs here in the greater Austin area.
So let's now matriculate down to 4A. And I said something on Football Friday, and I want to see if you are going to back me up on this, which is a dangerous position to put you in. But I made the comment that based on what we know right now and looking at the resumes, that 4A Division I, you have to say it goes through Argyle. They're, of course, the number one team in our rankings in 4A Division I. Their resume, especially now with a win over Waco La Vega, I think solidifies themselves as the team to beat in 4A Division I. Do I have your back on this? And so, do you want to make Lampasas fans mad too?
No, I'm in agreement with you on it. I think it does. I think Argyle has beaten the Comers to this point, and they've established themselves that. It's not to say Lampasas isn't a legitimate contender, because they are. And as you mentioned on the High School Scoreboard Live last week, don't kick dirt on La Vega yet. I think they're a legitimate contender. I think Port Lavaca Calhoun can be a serious threat, or Cal Allen, or some of the other teams that we've discussed, 4A Division I. I think there's some other teams that we can mention in all of that conversation. But at the top of the list, I am in agreement with you. I think Argyle is still the team to beat.
At Craigway1 on Twitter if you want to get to him too. It's Craigway, the Texas High Football Hall of Famer, joins us every Tuesday. It's today's Wednesday. Don't worry, don't adjust your calendar. On Texas Football Today, get involved in the conversation. Hashtag TFToday. Okay, then there's the interesting situation developing, I think, in 3A Division I. In 3A Division I, you have your choice right now. That I think the team with the strongest resume, maybe, or at least most emphatic resume, is probably Brock. But you also have to contrast that with Grandview, who is, of course, the two-time defending champs, and don't have a resume to turn their nose up at. I would say right now my edge would go to Brock with what they've been able to do. But, and by the way, there's a number of other teams, including Malakoff, including Wall, including Mount Vernon is a team to keep an eye on. But how do you parse that at the top with a team like Grandview that does have the trophies to show for it against a team like Brock that so far has looked the part of the number one team?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So what you're telling me is you're thumbing your nose at Dane Inch, if I'm hearing you correctly. Is that the deal? I just want to make sure. You visited with his sister. You talked to Dane. Yeah. You know what that family's like. No, I understand of what you're talking about. And here's the other thing we got to factor in. How will teams be affected by unexpected cancellations of games early? Mm-hmm. Obviously, you hope that things aren't impacted at the district level later on down the line. And the effect may be minimal or even non-existent once they really get going in district play and so on and so forth. But every game that's taken away from you, it kind of, it raises that issue. We were talking about now West Start and Start, perhaps any rumors that folks might have had about their demise might have been a little exaggerated. But Lampasas is going to go 3 weeks before they can play another game. We were talking about the Carthage not getting an opportunity, although they've got some tough opponents coming up. And I think the same thing, obviously, with Grandview unable to play Glen Rose last week. So that rolls through your mind. But if things normalize, which is really a high-risk thing to say in this day and age, but if it normalizes at all during district play, then I think you're talking about those being the top two teams, and they would be teams that would ultimately collide. You could kind of take your pick on either one of those.
Down to the 2A ranks, I kind of made a similar announcement and proclamation on Friday in the 2A Division I ranks about Shiner. Mm-hmm. And maybe I was just buzzing off of them going on the road, turning the ball over 7 times and still beating a state-ranked, a really good state-ranked East Bernard team. And obviously there's a team within their own region in Refugio that is going to have something to say about it. I am starting to view them in the same way that we were talking about Argyle as like They're probably beatable, but somebody's going to have to do it for me to believe it at this point. Are you in the same boat with the Comanches into Division I?
I am, and the resume would bear that up. Now, that said, if we could say right now, you're going to look, whatever, 10 weeks down the road or whatever, or to quarterfinal level, what's the most anticipated game or third round or whatever down the road that you might have, or second round, and you'd have to say a Shiner Refugio rematch would probably stand right at the top of the list. You'd have to be excited about thinking about that sort of thing. The added wrinkle, and we've talked about this on the television show, is Refugio being the road warriors that they are this year.
Sure.
So that kind of adds to the subplot. So they're not going to be cowed by wherever or whomever they play. That's always been the case with the Bobcats. But I think you can make the same case with Shiner going on the road and beat East Bernard last week in overtime and surviving the 8 turnovers. So that's what makes a potential rematch all the more enticing, were those two able to get together. And I think a lot of people think it is going to happen at some point.
And finally, Craig, you are going to be. We're not going to be together on Friday night. We're breaking up. You will be at AT&T Stadium in
Craig's
Arlington.
probably pumped.
Yeah, I know he is. But you're going to be at AT&T Stadium in Arlington on the call for the pair of Texas Football Days games, Arlington Martin and Denton Ryan in the early game, and then Longview and Temple in the nightcap. I know you want to save the good stuff for the broadcast, so tune into Fox Sports Southwest. But maybe is there a matchup that you're going to have your eye on for each of those games that you're particularly going to be focused on as far as telling us what we're going to be looking at?
I think you can look at it in two different ways, Ted. In the first game, the Ryan Martin game, it's a playmakers type of game. Yeah. So we know about Billy Bowman Jr. and Jatavian Sanders on the one side for Ryan, and then obviously with Maurice Blackwell for Martin. I think it's a playmakers kind of game. You're going to have that on the one side. Then in the second game, I'm curious to see which team's first-time starting quarterback steps to the fore, because we're going to see 2 quarterbacks for Temple. We're going to see 2 quarterbacks for Longview in the game, because both head coaches, Scott Stewart at Temple and John King at Longview, told us on our Zoom chats with them this week, they said no one guy has really stepped up and just absolutely taken over the position that it's mine. And in the case of Longview, not only you're trying to replace Haynes King, you're doing it with 2 sophomores. So I'm kind of curious to see that. I mean, it's going to be high school football, but it's kind of an Oprah Winfrey version of high school football. You get a quarterback, and you get a quarterback, and you get a quarterback, and you get a quarterback. We're going to see a lot of quarterbacks in that second game.
He's Craig Way, and then after he's done with that, he's going to get in his truck, and he's going to drive Google says it's 4 hours and 48 minutes. I've driven with you, so it'll be a cool 4. To Lubbock to call Longhorns and Red Raiders on the Longhorn Radio Network, the IMG College, or Learfield IMG College Radio Network. And yeah, Craig, I will miss you desperately, but I know you'll have a good time, and I'm sure we'll be talking before then.
Just keep distance from Renner, on the set. You'll need to do that.
I will certainly do that. Take care, pal.
Bye, Craig.
All right, we'll see you.